Another of his stories is of a cousin dying of cancer, and he describes so vividly Elmo Dinwiddie coughing up chunks of something, blood and guts, and lowering him to the ground in the bathroom, that you picture it so clearly that afterwards you're not sure whether you were there or you just heard Pawpaw tell the story. The most mundane story, the most mundane thing that he ever told a story about to make remarkable was an ink pen that he gave me when I was a kid. He could never just give you something, he had to have a story for it that made it a remarkable gift. And the only thing remarkable about this pen was that it had gray ink. And he described liquid lead as if this were the technological innovation of the century, just an amazing, impossible thing that had been accomplished. And you really thought you were getting something special by the time he finally stopped telling the story and handed over that pen to you. Pawpaw, it seemed common in those days for people to have a third grade education. That seemed to be the standard amount of formal education that people got before they were put to work on the farms. And so Pawpaw had a third grade education. Jasper, my grandfather. And barely literate with that little education, but he was a charmer and a storyteller and a people person and a hard worker, and he got a job selling top of the line expensive vacuum cleaners door to door, and eventually worked his way up to CEO of this vacuum cleaner company that was a large, at the time, nationwide company with sales offices in major cities all over the United States. And he was CEO. It was more than he could handle, and his own sense of inadequacy kind of overwhelmed him, and he began to drink very heavily, and the company went into bankruptcy, and he spent the last 20 years of his life driving a dry cleaner delivery truck. But that was what he was capable of. Again, the fatal family flaw that makes me comfortable totally abstaining from alcohol thwarted his potential. He was also a horseman. People that knew horses and knew horsemen would watch him ride and talk about him looking like he's one with the animal. He flowed so smoothly, so fluidly with a horse when he was riding it, that even other horsemen thought it was remarkable, the rider that he was. And finally, he was a myth maker. He didn't just tell the stories, he believed them. And he kind of passed that on to my dad. There was very little importance to them when they're telling family legends and stories, how much of it is fact and how much of it is romantic embellishment. So the stories that you'd get from Pawpaw, from Jasper, were remarkably more wonderful than the stories you'd get from his first cousin, Velma Lee, who, as a woman in those days, didn't see their accomplishments out in the field, only saw them coming home drunk. And so it was an interesting thing to hear the juxtaposition of their two dramatically different perspectives. But I remember Pawpaw, I saw his drinking, but I remember him for those things about him that made him fascinating to be around. He used to make Kenneth and I stick horses. He'd take a broomstick or a mop stick handle, and if he cut chips out of the paint so that it was spotted, that was an Appaloosa, and if he scraped all the paint off, it was a Palomino. If he scraped just a little bit of the paint off, it was a paint or something. But he'd make us different kinds of horses depending on how he scraped off the paint. And he would then cut a little niche in the top. He'd cut a little blast. Is that still giving me something or not? Blast. Because I hadn't touched it in too long.
It's still active.
Well, the camera was still on. But you got to touch mouse or keyboard. Blast. It's just about done. I may just leave that and clip off the last sentence. Okay, that's good for today.
Have you finished your pawpaw?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not so much to get your daddy done, is it?
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. My kids don't know Daddy that I grew up with, and they don't know the stories of well enough to remember to retell them stories of him on the racetracks and stuff like that. Ryman Wolford's Twin City Horse and Mule Barn. Stories of his pasturing when I was young, and he was still energetic and hopeful. Am I smelling pesticide? Sure seems like I am. Alright, let's see. Where's the V Lounge? Oh, I didn't mean Brad. That's why there's nothing there. I mean Karen, that's what it was on. Alright, you're going to tell me that's still going. Alright. How do I stop it then? Hello? How do I stop it now?